In the small mountain town of Cedar Ridge, where pine trees stood like silent guardians and the river sang day and night, lived the Harper family in a modest wooden house with a wide front porch and flower boxes that bloomed even in winter. At the center of everything was Clara Harper. She was 51, with soft gray hair she still wore in a loose braid, and eyes the color of warm honey that always seemed to see more than people said. Clara had married Daniel at 22. He was a carpenter who built beautiful things, but never quite enough to escape paycheck-to-paycheck living. They had 4 children. Hannah, 29, a school counselor who carried other people's pain so quietly that her own sorrow often went unnoticed. Ethan, 26, who worked construction with his father and dreamed of opening his own workshop, but never believed he was good enough. Grace, 23, studying to become a midwife because she wanted to bring life into the world the way her mother had always made her feel safe. And Caleb, 17, the quiet boy who loved astronomy, spent nights on the roof with a second-hand telescope and worried constantly that he was letting everyone down. Clara made their home feel like the safest place on earth. She baked cinnamon bread on Sunday mornings, kept jars of wild honey on the shelf, patched jeans so neatly you couldn't see the tear, and really listened, when anyone needed to speak. She never raised her voice, never asked for praise, never let anyone see how tired she sometimes was. When the lumber mill closed 8 years ago and Daniel lost steady work for almost 2 years, Clara started taking in sewing and mending. She turned the small sunroom into her workspace. Late at night the sewing machine would hum while the rest of the house slept. Her fingers grew calloused, her back ached, but the electricity stayed on and the children never went without coats or books. One winter Hannah came home crying after her fiancé left her 2 weeks before the wedding. Clara sat with her on the porch swing until dawn, wrapped in the same quilt she'd made when Hannah was born. She didn't say, "You'll find someone better." She only said, "You are already whole, sweetheart. You always were." When Ethan's boss yelled at him in front of the crew and he came home shaking with anger and shame, Clara made him chamomile tea and sat beside him on the back steps. She told him about the time Daniel once broke a chair he'd spent 3 weeks building because he was so frustrated with himself. "Even the strongest hands tremble sometimes," she said. "It doesn't mean they can't still build beautiful things." When Grace failed her anatomy exam and thought she wasn't smart enough to be a midwife, Clara took her to the riverbank and showed her the wild iris that grew through cracks in the rocks. "Strength isn't always loud," she said. "Sometimes it just keeps showing up." And when Caleb's telescope lens cracked during a school camping trip and he cried like he had when he was 5, Clara drove 30 miles to the nearest city, sold the silver bracelet she'd worn every day since her wedding, and bought him a new one. She never told him where the money came from. She only said, "The stars deserve to be seen clearly." Clara never spoke much about her own childhood. Only once, when Caleb asked why she never got angry, did she say quietly, "Because I remember what it feels like when the person who's supposed to love you most turns away." Years passed in that gentle rhythm of small joys and small struggles. Then the tiredness came. At first Clara blamed the long hours bent over fabric. Then she blamed the cold winter. She started coughing dry at first, then deeper. She hid the blood-streaked tissues in her apron pocket. She kept smiling, kept cooking, kept sewing. Daniel noticed first. One evening, he found her sitting on the stairs, head in her hands. "Clara," he said, voice low and afraid, "you're not well." "I'm fine," she answered automatically. "You're not." She looked up at him then, really looked, and for the first time in 30 years he saw fear in her eyes. The doctor visit was quick and cruel. Lung cancer. Advanced. Spread to the bones and liver. They gave her 6 to 12 months with treatment. Maybe less without. She told the children herself, all together in the living room on a Sunday afternoon when the light was soft and golden. Hannah started crying before Clara finished the sentence. Ethan stared at the floor so hard it looked like he was trying to burn a hole through it. Grace whispered no over and over like a prayer that could undo reality. Caleb sat perfectly still, face blank, until suddenly he stood up, walked outside, and didn't come back until after midnight. Clara let them feel everything. She didn't try to fix it. She only said, "We're going to walk through this together. All of us." The months that followed were both terrible and strangely beautiful. Chemo made her sick in ways she couldn't hide. Her hair fell out. She lost weight until her wedding ring spun loose on her finger. Pain lived in her body like an unwelcome guest that never left. But she refused to let the house become a hospital. She still made Sunday cinnamon bread. Ethan carried the mixing bowl to her chair so she could stir. She still listened to Hannah's stories about the kids at school. She still asked Grace about her patients and told her she was proud. She still went outside with Caleb on clear nights and let him point out constellations, even when the cold hurt her lungs. She started making things. Not dresses or curtains anymore. She made letters. One for each child. One for Daniel. Long, handwritten pages filled with memories, advice, apologies for things she never did wrong, and hopes she had for their futures. For Hannah, you have always carried other people's hearts so carefully. Don't forget to carry your own the same way. For Ethan, you are already building something beautiful every time you show up for the people who love you. That's the real work. For Grace, the world needs gentle hands like yours. Never doubt that you belong in the sacred places. For Caleb, the stars were there long before any of us, and they'll be there long after. You don't have to be big to matter. You just have to keep looking up. For Daniel, you are my safe harbor. Thank you for every single day. She also made a quilt. She used pieces of their old clothes, Hannah's first school dress, Ethan's favorite flannel shirt, Grace's baby blanket, Caleb's torn jeans from the night he fell off his bike and refused to cry. She sewed slowly, painfully, every stitch a prayer. "This is for when I'm not here to keep you warm," she told them with a small smile. They protested. She just kept sewing. One December evening, when snow was falling thick and soft outside, Clara called everyone to her room. She was very weak now. Oxygen tubes rested under her nose. Her voice was barely above a whisper. She looked at each of them. "I need you to hear this," she said. "I have loved being your mother more than anything else I've ever done. More than I ever thought I could love anything. You made every hard day worth it. Every tired night. Every tear. Every fear. You were my reason." She reached for Daniel's hand. "I'm not afraid to go. I'm only sad I won't see who you all become next. But I trust you. I trust the people you already are." She looked at her children. "Promise me one thing. Take care of each other. Not because you have to, but because you want to. Because that's what families do when they've been loved the way I've loved you." They promised through tears. That night, Clara fell asleep with Daniel holding one hand and Caleb holding the other. Hannah, Ethan, and Grace sat on the floor beside the bed. She never woke up. The funeral was small. The whole town came anyway. People stood outside the little church because there wasn't room inside. They told stories about Clara, how she brought soup when someone was sick, how she stayed late to help decorate the community hall, how she never let anyone feel invisible. Afterward, the house felt too quiet. Daniel wandered from room to room, touching things she'd touched. Hannah slept in Clara's old quilt. Ethan started building a small table he'd promised to make her years ago. Grace kept every note Clara had ever written her. Caleb took the quilt up to the roof and wrapped it around himself while he looked at the stars. Months later, while sorting through Clara's things, they found the letters she'd written. They read them together in the living room, crying and laughing and holding each other. They found something else, too. A small notebook hidden under the sewing machine. Inside were dates and amounts. Doctor visits she had canceled. Medicines she never picked up. Appointments she skipped so there would be money for Grace's textbooks, Caleb's telescope repair, Anna's rent when she was between jobs, Ethan's tools. She had known something was wrong long before she told anyone. She had chosen to wait. Not because she didn't want to fight, but because she wanted to give them every possible day without fear of hospital bills and debt. Hannah whispered, "She gave us everything." Ethan said, "Even the last thing she had." Years turned slowly. Hannah opened a small counseling practice in town and offered free sessions for teenagers. Ethan's workshop finally opened, He named it Clara's Wood. The sign was simple, hand-carved. Grace became a midwife. Every time she helped deliver a baby, she whispered Clara's name under her breath. Caleb went to college on a scholarship he never knew Clara had secretly applied for. He studied astrophysics and sent home pictures of the night sky. Daniel never remarried. He kept the house exactly as it was. Every Sunday, he still made cinnamon bread, even when it never tasted quite the same. Every year on the day Clara left, the family gathered on the porch. They brought her quilt, lit a lantern, read from her letters, and told stories until the stars came out. They never stopped missing her. But they never stopped feeling her either. She was in the way the river kept singing, in the way the wild iris still bloomed through cracks, in the way they held each other when the world felt too heavy. She was in the quiet, steady love they gave one another. And that love was the longest, strongest thing she ever built.